Hi, my name is Shane Burrell, and I am a communication graduate student at California State University, San Bernardino, and I'm going to be presenting my research on identification in virtual environments, identifying in virtual reality. So the introduction to my research is the purpose of my research was to examine the phenomenon of identification in virtual reality, and I did that by using a liminality theory. And my research question came out to be, do participants of virtual reality need to establish identification in a virtual environment for the simulation to have an effect? And what that means is any type of an effect that is coming from a virtual reality simulation is what I was really trying to look for. And so I did this by establishing my literature review, which was to look into the history of virtual reality and like what was the conception and how did that actually happen. And so Stephen Downey in 2016 had documented that over 50 years ago that there were that virtual reality has actually came into fruition. However, in 1962, Morton Helig, he was the first person to patent the innovation of virtual reality. He was a Jewish filmmaker who wanted to have a more immersive experience for his audience. However, Downey does document that virtual worlds do have three different generations beginning in 1978. And so he documents the first generation, as I said, in 1978 as small scale systems with text-based displays. So if you would imagine like Dungeons and Dragons using Pong, like the gaming system Pong, that would be like the first generation. Our second generation is more so like the first Nintendo that came out in 1985 with being able to use Mario as your avatar and throwing fireballs at turtles and being able to have a little bit more of an enhanced display. However, in 1997, Downey explains that the third generation had actually begun, and the third generation would be what the generation we are in now. For example, having the student research competition being televised on YouTube. YouTube is a virtual environment. The environment itself is just the platform. However, it's what the content is being placed on there that actually dictates how the environment will interact with users and adults. So what is identification? Identification is defined by Steve Cohen as the mechanism through which audience members experience reception and interpretation of the text from inside, as if the events were happening to them. So essentially what he's saying here is that identification is this idea in which we're actually personifying or like giving feelings or seeing the world through the media character's eyes and being able to establish like a sense of paradigm and seeing their paradigms and feeling their emotions in which we think that they are actually feeling. And so a way to illustrate this is to use the clip Wall-E. I'm not going to use the entire clip, but I will show an important factor. And so essentially that's what it was. Identification would be like if you were smiling or you laughed or you thought it was really cute that Eva kissed Wally. That's identification. Identification is we're personifying those emotions that we believe that these media characters have, even though we know that these media characters were two robots who were animated that were in space. We know that that doesn't exist. So essentially, that's what the identification has on a person when they're viewing media. And so identification in virtual reality has not been researched. And because it hasn't been researched, I'm actually conducting the first qualitative study currently right now, although it's on a halt because of the coronavirus. I am doing a mixed method study for my thesis, beginning with my qualitative methods. So I am currently doing that right now, and as I said, there's no research on identification in virtual reality. However, the research that has been done on virtual reality has really been looking at presence and immersion, and a lot of the research that does come out states that their participants have indicated that they have a sense of ownership of the media characters within the virtual simulation. And so because of that, I wanted to explore what that meant, and I kind of came to these factorials of identification in virtual reality. And the way I was able to explore identification in virtual reality was using the liminality theory, which essentially is if Arnold van Gennep has details that as the preliminal, liminal, and postliminal. And I like to use the example of a Jewish child. So a Jewish child is in a preliminal stage until they reach a certain age. And at that age, they are then put into a liminal stage, which is a stage in which you're kind of suspended, like not really a child, but not really an adult anymore, or just yet, until you perform your bat mitzvah. And when you give your bat mitzvah in front of your congregation, you are either accepted or denied. So you can either be put into the role of a Jewish man or a Jewish woman, or they make you do it again until you get it right. And so that's kind of like the overview of liminality, moving from stages within life and having society dictate what stage you're going to do and how you're going to contribute. Um, Victor Turner has actually made a modernity of the liminality theory, saying that we don't actually have these rites of passage anymore, but we more so have like events in our lives, like going to a concert when we're a teenager or seeing our first R-rated movie, that actually help us move from preliminal, liminal, and then post-liminal. Bjorn Thompson actually takes that a step further and says that we're in a constant state of preliminal, and that our preliminal stage, and he uses a bungee jump theory, or what he calls the bungee jump theory, which essentially is like our preliminal stage is always that we are on the edge of the bridge, and we only reach the liminals when we jump off. And we're like trying to bungee jump. And so when we're falling, we're in the liminal stage, but we actually never go past the liminal stage, because if we did, we would die. He says, then we get shot back from the liminal stage back to the preliminal, and we're in a constant state of trying to reach the liminal stage throughout our entire lives. I don't necessarily think that that is the way that we could actually use liminality in virtual reality. We are able to really look at it in the sense of moving in and out of environments that have a strong impact on us. So the preliminal, in my opinion, and how liminality appears to virtual reality is that the preliminal is before we're in the virtual environment. The liminal is when we have our gear on and we're waiting to get into the simulation. And then our post-liminal is when we're actually in the simulation and we're experiencing it firsthand, which is essentially what we're looking at here. And this slide is this first-person perspective of a virtual environment. I also like the explanation from Gualini. They explain that most often this has been conceptualized as the embodiment in the form of an avatar. The figure the player identifies as themselves in the game world or in virtual reality. So essentially, it's just kind of like how we're able to like see ourselves and how ourselves are pertained and how we move through these stages to get to a virtual stage. So the effects of virtual reality, or the effects of identification in virtual reality, are simply put as that identification is so exponential that we are actually able to have more advancements within like innovative technologies by using identification. And by doing so, we're able to create these worlds in which we can take away like large attributes or large trainings. For example, we can train like medical professionals to be surgeons and not actually have to use cadavers, or we can train soldiers on how to be in a combative battlefield without actually being on a battlefield. We're able to change the way that we look at education and how education can affect us, and how we're actually being able to do it through a virtual environment as well. As like as of right now with this pandemic, where having a virtual classroom might be more impactful for student learning, for those who are learning online. And so to conclude everything, I just kind of like want to reiterate that the that the use of identification in virtual reality is just so exponential, and that there's just no to little research except for my qualitative study currently on it, that more research actually needs to be done. So uh, that's all I have. Thank you.